Hello, weary traveler. I hear you're wanting to learn how to top 8 a modern challenge on Magic the Gathering Online with Jund Death Shadow. Well, good luck. See you next video. Alright, so if you can tell, the length of the video is quite a bit longer than that. So, fortunately, I may have a little bit of information to help you get there, but we'll see. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. Works for me, and I'm going to show you why. So we did top 8 yesterday's Modern Challenge, Saturday, October 7th, with Jund Death Shadow. And I'm going to go over the deck list, some of the card choices, and obviously we'll go through the matches. We'll talk about a little bit of sideboarding, some decision making, go into some changes I might make going forward. And who knows, maybe if this is a variation of Shadow you're interested in picking up, this will serve as a little bit of a deck guide for you. If not, then, well, I don't know why you're still watching this. So, anyway, let's get into it. Jund Death Shadow is a variant that I've been really high on recently. I did top 8, like a local RCQ with Jund Shadow. I've done fairly well in leagues recently, and going back over a lot of the data that I've collected, I've seen that my results have been pretty consistent. I've had really good win rates against the scam decks, against Rhinos, against mURktide, against Hardened scales. Favorable, although not like by some insane amount, win rates against Omnath. And so this is kind of like the list I feel is pretty competitive in the current meta. Now, obviously, that won't be the same if you're expecting a local meta of Burn and Tron and Amulet Titan and stuff like that, but that's not really what I'm expecting for the Magic Online challenges, so this is my list for that. Let's break it down, and I don't mean dancing because that would be a horrible sight to see on camera. So, I'm sure most of you, if you're clicking on the video, if you've ever seen the Death Shadow archetype before, you're probably pretty familiar with the bulk of the core of the deck. So things like the 4 copies of Death Shadow itself, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Tarmogoyf, at the moment the 4 Orcish Bowmasters, 4 Mishra's Bauble, some number of Baubles, or some number of Lightning Bolts, some number of Unholy Heat, maybe Terminate. But then there's some questionable choices in here that you might be like, yo, bro, what the heck? Why this? Let's see if I can give you a bit of an answer. So first off, you see the full 8 1-mana removal spells, the 4 Lightning Bolt, the 4 Unholy Heat. Fatal Push is a card that exists. I'm aware of that. Fatal Push is really good if you're expecting a bunch of Prowess, or it's even reasonable against Hardened Scales and Hammer Time, like better against Hammer Time than Unholy Heat is, or a lot of the times Lightning Bolt. Why no Fatal Push? So, Fatal Push doesn't answer a Scammed Fury, which Unholy Heat can, might take an extra turn. Bolt doesn't, but you've got reach with Bolt that you don't have with other removal spells. It doesn't answer a Solitude. It doesn't answer a mURktide Regent. It doesn't answer a Primeval Titan. Let's see, what else do I care about that it doesn't answer? I absolutely have Goldfish pulled up looking at these, so do not expect them to be off the top of my head. Does not answer a Scion of Urza. I think that's about all the relevant ones. But we see there are quite a few things that like Fatal Push doesn't deal with. It's really good at the small things going big. It's not very good at the late game big things staying big. So Unholy Heat gives us a much better answer to those. And the fact that it also answers turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Dolthy against decks like Scam, can answer a Rhino, can answer everything out of Yogg, including Grist, can answer Teferi, Wrenn and 6. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff. And Delirium's not the toughest thing to get online. You do have your fetch lands, you have cheap creatures that are going to the yard, you have a lot of instants, and then you've got sorceries with Thoughtseize, as well as Fable potentially. So it's not unreasonable to have Delirium online turn 3, 4, something like that. Let's see, the rest of the choices. The One of Questing Druid. So this is a card I've been messing around with in part to the recommendation by a player named Sadistic Sage. You can find them on Magic Online, or I believe in the Control Freak Discord, which obviously we'll have a link to that down below in the description. If you're wanting to ask questions about Questing Druid, I know they have been exponentially higher on the card than I have, but it's still been a pretty cool little value engine in the matches that I've seen it. So I'm interested in trying it out more. Whether or not it's a permanent staple in the deck, I don't know yet. But hey, that's the purpose of the challenges, is to test things out. The 4 copies of Ragavan, I see people all the time asking, well, why not Dragon's Rage Chandler? To me, because Ragavan has so much more of an upside than Dragon's Rage Chandler, especially in a deck that doesn't have like Street Wraith and isn't built to get Delirium. It just happens to get Delirium eventually. Ragavan also allows you, along with Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Giganta, to play through opposing Blood Moons extraordinarily well and get the upside of being able to play Blood Moon in our sideboard, as you can see through these top 2 cards over here. So we have the ability to disrupt our opponent's mana while also being very proficient at protecting our own. Really, really big highlight to the deck. It's one of the reasons that I decided to go Jund in the first place. We'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to the sideboard. But to enable that, we've got the 4 copies of Ragavan. The Giganta is our companion, so no Street Wraith, no Dismember, no Fury or Endurance. 3 copies of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Because not only is this a fantastic value engine, it is a breaker of the mid-range mirrors, allowing you to not only create multiple bodies, but loot away dead cards, find lands, find interactive spells, find more threats. And then late game does a heck of a job of copying Bowmasters against the One Ring or Tarmogoyfs when you need the beatdown. Or just enabling a quick Kroxa, being able to ditch a Kroxa and something else on turn 4 and then immediately escape it is a huge, huge, huge tempo swing. Which, as you can see, we are rocking 2 copies of Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. Yet again, I'll get the questions. Well, why not Underworld Breach? Well, Kroxa is a whole mess of a lot better against things like 1-for-1 spot removal and against... counter spells than Underworld Breach is. And when you have decks like mURktide, Rhinos with Force of Negation and Mystical Dispute, Omnath potentially having counterspell up towards the top of the meta, it's really nice to be able to get those 2-for-1s with Kroxa, especially if you can 2-for-1 on turn 2, or 1-for-1, and then 1-for-1 again when it comes back. So you've essentially 2-for-1 because 1 Kroxa, 2 of their cards. And then you attack and you're at a 3-for-1. And so much better if they have to spend a removal spell on the Kroxa, and all of a sudden you're way up on cards. So Kroxa just being able to outgrind and outvalue like Scam, Omnath, mURktide, attack through chump blockers out of Yawgmoth, get bigger than Rhinos. Yeah, it's a lot for decks to have to deal with. So moving on to the sideboard. Oh, and I forgot, right before this event, way other direction, down in the 4th row from your left, 5th card from the bottom, you see a Terra Sunder. That was a meta call. That was, hey, I'm expecting a bunch of Tron for some reason, or Amulet Titan, and I just want like a value piece in here that I can kick and deal with a mURktide or a Scam Threat. But if I want to be able to deal with a Fable or Expedition map, Urza Saga, something game 1, then Terra Sunder is kind of my go-to. I think the flexibility is absolutely phenomenal. And you think about 4 mana being a lot for a shadow deck, but when you have Ragavan, Fable making tokens that are making mana and ditching dead stuff to potentially find more lands, 4 mana is really not that big of an ask. Now, over to the sideboard. 2 copies of Blood Moon. Anything that gives you unfair mana, whether it be Tron lands, whether it be bounce lands and sagas out of Amulet Titan, sagas out of other decks like Hardened Scales, Hammer Time, Inkmoth Nexus, anything like that that you don't want to spend a bunch of spot removals or you can't otherwise remove. Blood Moon gives you a really good answer to those kind of cards. 1 copy of Terra Sunder to match the one in the main. Again, great at stopping like Modular triggers from Zabaz, exiles the One Ring, exiles Wormcoil Engine, hits Urza Saga, Colossus Hammer. You can take out a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. You can kick it and take out an Omnath. You can kick it and take out a Fury, whatever the case may be. 2 Collector Oof, mostly Hardened Scales and Tron. Every now and then you'll see Affinity and stuff like that. But Collector Oof, I think, is a really, really good piece at slowing them down enough to have a chance, but only if you see it on turn 2. If you see it later, it's probably not doing much for you. Terminate to round out the removal package against decks like Scam, mURktide, where you just need more, gotta kill this thing. 3 Chalice of the Void, Cascade, Living End, Rhinos. As you probably know, if you're one of these savvy veteran Giganta players, you cannot reveal Giganta if you have Chalice of the Void. But at the end of the day, if Chalice of the Void is the best answer we have access to against decks like Living End and Rhinos, then I'm okay giving up Giganta to have that like hard hate piece. And 3 copies means I'm more than likely going to see one before turn 3. 2 Engineered Explosives for decks like Rhinos, for Hardened Scales, for Hammer Time. You can use it to take out Sanctifier on Vex against Burn. Reasonable against Yawgmoth, but not great. And then every now and then you'll just see random decks with like little go wide strategies, whether it be elves or goblins or stuff like that. EE gives a nice little versatile answer to those decks. 1 Unlicensed Hearse. I'm really, really light on the Grave Hate. I feel, and this is a personal opinion, so if you're not feeling the same way, feel free to throw in the Nihil Spell Bombs. I've run into decks like Living End so much where I've had Nihil Spellbomb and they've had Leyline of Sanctity. And I've thought about going to Soul Guide Lantern and going that route, which is fine, but it's so much worse of a Grave Hate piece against the fair decks. And I feel like I'm winning those matchups anyway. I feel like I'm beating Scam and I'm beating mURktide. So I don't really think I need to focus a bunch of like fair value Grave Hate. So I just have the 1 Unlicensed Hearse. I can bring it in against Living In and the unfair Grave decks. I'm probably just going to lose to Reanimator. That's okay. It's okay to have a absolutely horrible matchup. But on the plus side, I get to get a little bit better against like Living In by not being weak to Leyline of Sanctity. Maybe I hit the hearse against something like Dredge, but I just hope to dodge those matches. 2 Damping Sphere, the last of the Tron hate, the Amulet hate. Big mana, as you can tell, is the nightmare matchup for us. So I definitely overstocked because I know from my challenge experience, my league experience, I am going to see big mana decks, whether it be Tron, Amulet, Coffers, something like that. I'm going to run into them. So that's why you see me like so overboarded for those. And I cannot stress this point enough. It's because I feel very, very, very confident with this deck beating the fair decks, beating the Scams, the mURktides, the Omnaths. I feel like there's a lot of player decisions there, a lot of skill benefits, like bumps in your win rate by your decision making in those matchups. And I feel very good about them. What I don't feel good about is the unfair decks that I can't say no to. So that's the big theme of the sideboard, is trying to come up with stuff for the unfair decks. And big mana, I think, is the most popular of the unfair decks right now. So that's kind of where I'm geared in the sideboard. I've heard many players over the years talk about, hey, you play a 3-game series because you have a sideboard. Utilize it. Use that to help out with your bad matchups. So we took that to the absolute extreme. But that's it for the intro to the video. Nice little 15-minute introduction going over the deck list. If you have questions about the card choices, feel free to drop them down below, and I will try my absolute best to answer every single one of them. If I don't get it right away, if I don't answer it right away, just keep pinging me, tag me, whatever. and I'll try to get back and do that. Otherwise, I'll have a full breakdown probably on my Discord, and I might do like a write-up on Reddit. I used to do those a lot more, so we'll see. But anyway, let's get into the matches so you can see how the deck actually plays out instead of just hearing some random dude ramble on and on about, oh, Jund Shadow's great. Jund Shadow will take down your local tournament. Buy Jund Shadow or your money back. Don't do it. All right, round one against Wamboozled. We've got an opening hand of one land. Thoughtseized and Bolt is pretty okay. We're on the draw, so we have a little bit of a chance of getting that second land before our third scene card, second scene card, yeah. Because we got this one. We'll be drawing one. Pass the turn, draw another. They didn't reveal a companion, so could be Scam, could be mURktide, could be Omnath, could be Rhinos, could be Yawgmoth, could be Hammer Time, could be Amulet Titan, could be Burn, could be Living In, could be just about anything. I figure my early interaction is pretty good with the Bolt and the Thoughtseized, and if I just draw a second land, then the hand's like completely open, so we decide to keep it. It looks like we're up against mURktide. mURktide itself, obviously the biggest pain in the butt to deal with out of this deck, so I'm pretty comfortable taking it, leaving them with another Preordain, a Bolt, a Heat, and a Force Negation. My hand really doesn't care about Force, and if I play out my threats kind of one at a time, then I don't really care about the spot removal too much. They are an instant and a land away from Delirium or an artifact, so I know I can safely get down the Goyf. If they find a red source and they're able to double removal spell the Goyf, I'm pretty okay with that because I just have Shadow Bowmaster next turn. And this is why you don't play Modern Challenges without enough sleep or give yourself enough time to get up and get coffee and get ready for the day, because my opponent has just played a Misty Rainforest. You know what I did not notice at all? My opponent playing a Misty Rainforest. So now, when I'm thinking, oh, they can't kill my Goyf and my Ragavan because they only have one red. And I dash this thing like an idiot, like an absolute buffoon. And my opponent's like, oh, free real estate, Bolt the Ragavan, fetch up to give Delirium, Unholy Heat the Tarmogoyf. And I'm just like, oh. So at least we get to follow up with a Shadow that does dodge a Bolt, I guess. And they have 3 cards, so as we configure, one of them's another mURktide. We've got this really sweet line. So if opponent didn't draw a blue spell, then we can attack into the mURktide. If they don't block, then we deal our 4, put them to 11. If they attack back, we've got lethal going towards them. If they don't not block, so if they do block, then we can bolt ourselves and then Bowmaster to ping ourselves again and outgrow the mURktide, as long as they didn't draw another blue card, because they don't have Delirium. They can't Unholy Heat my Death Shadow, or they just drew a counter spell and our whole plan goes to ruin. So we've got a massive 1 punt already in the first game of the first round. Not looking good. Sideboarding. I said in the last 2 videos I'm going to make a bigger effort in explaining sideboarding as the matches are going on. So that's what I'm going to try to do now. Since my sideboard today is so geared towards the unfair stuff, you're going to see a lot of sideboarding that's very, very minimal against the fair matchups. For example, here I brought in the second copy of Terra Sunder. I brought in the second Terminate, and I brought in the Unlicensed Hers. And that was it. That's it. 3 cards, 3 in, 3 out, for what looked like a horrible matchup game 1. Mostly due to my punt, but we're past that. We've moved on to bigger and better things. 3 cards in, boarding out a couple copies of Ragavan because on the play it's a bit better. On the draw, it's horrible. I really don't like Ragavan in the matchup. I know I saw a comment in one of the last videos that talked about, oh, don't board out all the Ragavans against mURktide because you top deck one late and you can dash it. I get that, but at the same time, if my chances of top decking a Ragavan late are decreasing my chances of top decking like a Goyf late or a Shadow or a Fable or a Kroxa, something like that, I would much rather just top deck one of those late. So I get the theory, but I want to get the game over with. I don't want to try to outvalue or outgrind the deck that's got expressive iterations. Not a great game plan. So I would much rather focus on that idea of getting my opponent dead ASAP. And then Thoughtseize comes out because, one, they are a bolt deck, so they can bolt you out if you get too low and too greedy. But two, I want to be able to take like an early mURktide, and then I just never want to see a Thoughtseize again. Or maybe sandbag one before something that I can't afford to get countered. But I just don't want to be flooded on Thoughtseizes. All right. So we keep a hand that's got functional mana. It's got a couple threats. It doesn't have any interaction, but between Bobble and my fetch lands, I kind of figure I can draw into something, which, like this Unholy Heat here, we do manage to do. And you do have to remember that in this shell, flooding out's not the worst thing in the world because you do have, like, Giganta that you can play to. So you can afford to have a few extra lands. And then we get our first taste of Questing Druid, flipping over an Unholy Heat and a Tarmogoyf, which is fantastic. So if you haven't read Questing Druid before, it's 1 and a green for a 1/1. It gets a +1/+1 counter whenever you cast a black, red, white, or blue spell. So anything that's not green. And you have this adventure side that you can pay 1 and a red at instant speed, exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you can play them until your next end step. So it lets you exile the top 2 cards like on your opponent's turn, play them through your turn. Feels really good when you're on 2 lands and you hit like 3rd land Fable of the Mirror Breaker. But since our deck is so low curve cost-wise, that more often than not, we're going to hit some playable stuff. And you can play lands off of it. So as you saw, opponent with their 1-lander whiffed on the second, and Tarmogoyf just able to take the distance there. Tarmogoyf is an excellent threat in this matchup. It's usually bigger than they can deal with Bolt, which kind of leads to Unholy Heat being the only answer. And you're usually able to get it down under Counterspell. So huge buff to it. We do have the basic swamp here, so we're going to Bowmaster, but I want to point out the basic swamp to show that we are like a little insulated against Blood Moon. If our opponent does just like turn 3 slam a moon here, we've got Fable. We could Seek the Beast off the Questing Druid. That's the adventure side for anybody taking notes at home. So we've got stuff we can do. We could add Giganta afterwards and play it a couple turns later. Here we just get our second copy of our basic swamp. So if they do end up Blood Mooning, then we have the chance to fight through that pretty easily, honestly. And you see there, they loot away a Blood Moon. Want to know why? Because it's not very good against us. And that's a very powerful thing to be able to kind of showcase. So Goyf, it looks like it's going to get countered. I'm pretty okay with that because I get to kill the Ledger Shredder, get some more damage in. Going to kill it off the Unholy Heat so that I've got the Terminate in case they follow up with a mURktide. And now with the pressure on board, I'm just putting them in a very awkward situation where they have to have some good stuff back to back to back. here, seeking the beast before they get an opportunity to get those cards off expressive iteration. I know that I've got the Terminate to kill the Channeler if I need to. It looks like they might have found another counter spell. But I'm also just not that afraid of the Channeler at the moment. So as we can see, they did find the counter spell. I could terminate it, but it has to attack. I'm at 13 life. They've got 2 cards, and I've got, 12 power on board. So, yeah, bring on the Channeler. Down to 1 card. Croaks off the top means we get to get the card out of hand, have the free terminate on the Channeler. That's how you start off 1-0. Like I said, I think our matchup against the mURktide deck's pretty good. Round 2 against Xenoon reveals the Gigantha, so it could be like Tron or something. Nope, Prowess. So I know this hand isn't very good against Tron, but again, that's why we've got games 2 and 3. I don't want to throw back a functional hand on an assumption, because if something like this happens, like, oh, they're Prowess, or, oh, if they were another fair shadow deck or something like that, then I would have thrown back a really good hand to try to get something that wasn't very good in this matchup. So I'd rather just let game 1 play out and then go to game 2 and 3 with a little bit of a sideboard change. I am... Yeah, casting my Unholy Heat on my turn because I don't want my opponent to be able to cast spells in response. If they have another Mutagenic Growth, they have another Mutagenic Growth. I can't do much about that. But took out the Channeler because it was the flying threat that I wouldn't be able to stand in front of. And I knew if I survived like this, I'd be able to get a bunch of blockers down. So we are going a little low, but we are going low to still have a Death Shadow that stands in front of like a Soulscar Mage. Then I think this was a bit of a mistake attack. So they ended up bolting me going down to 1, which is reasonable if they had like another burn spell. But without another burn spell, they just kind of like give up their Soulscar Mage for no real reason. And now it's coming to a top deck war. I say a top deck war. I'm at 1. The odds are fairly low. They're not 0, but fairly low. Which they do get better for me if my opponent's fetching and shocking down to like lethal attack range. So Bowmaster really good at providing some bodies to clog up the board. We see Reflection again. Those 2 bodies really mattering off Reflection. Opponent double chumps. Stays at 13. Iteration. Praying for no bolt. Unholy Heat the Fable. No follow-up land. And we get to ping them with the Bowmaster and attack down with a Shadow. So, people saying Bowmaster's not impactful, literally out here winning games. Don't know what to tell you. Do it on their turn, just in case there's something like Subtlety that they have main deck. I don't know why they would, but sideboarding. Totally didn't skip over that. I don't know what you're talking about. Sideboarding against Prowess. Ragavan, pretty easy cut. Between the threats that they have, Bolt, probably Lava Dart, maybe Gut Shot. Ragavan's just like super, super dead. Thoughtseize is coming out because, again, they're a Bolt You Out deck. I don't want to have too many ways of losing life. And the fact that after like turn 3 or 4-ish, they're just playing stuff off the top, so Thoughtseize is a very dead draw after that. But the first Thoughtseize can have a lot of value at taking things like Gigantha that they add, taking Underworld Breach, Expressive Iteration. So there is some value to Thoughtseize. Bringing in the Unlicensed Hearse almost exclusively because of Underworld Breach, but also a little bit because of forcing Lava Darts at inopportune times and stopping Delirium. Bringing in the Terminate for self-explanatory reasons. They have dudes. I don't want dudes on their side of the field. Terminate, pretty good way of doing that. Terra Sunder. So you can get in some cool situations where they play an Underworld Breach, go to cast a spell, you respond with Terra Sunder, and they don't have anything instant speed to do, and they just like lose the Underworld Breach. So, but you can also kick it, take out a threat, which is relevant. And then the last two were the 2 copies of Engineered Explosives, whole bunch of 1-mana creatures, whole bunch of Engineered Explosives on 1. Enough said. Good hand. Multiple removal spells. We've got Tarmogoyfs, like our best roadblock. So I've said before against like Burn and Prowess that Tarmogoyf is our best threat. And most of the reason for that is that you don't have to invest a bunch of life into it like you do with Shadow. It usually outgrows Bolt very, very quickly. It clogs up the ground pretty effectively. Opponent adds Gigantha, no attack, so Tarmogoyf already doing a phenomenal job of standing in the way of stuff. Fable adding an extra body, giving us a way to like ditch this Kroxa for something. If they do find an answer for the Goyf and the Shaman, we get to double Shadow. And then we'll go ahead and ditch the Kroxa. We'll ditch one of the Shadows. I could keep it, but I really don't need the second Shadow. Like, I've got a good board presence. I'd rather just get to escaping this Kroxa sooner. And we saw our opponent had a Prismatic Ending, so they could have taken out the Goyf and attacked last turn. I guess they were afraid that I did have a Shadow, which would have ended up very good for us because we would have just gotten to play out double Shadow. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Then, since we've got enough mana now, we can just escape Kroxa. I want to escape the Kroxa first. Let's break down the life total loss real quick. So, if I bolt the Swift Spear and attack, then they can block Gigantha on the Shadow. They take 4 off the Tarmogoyf, 2 off the Goblin token, go to 2. I escape Kroxa. They've got a card left. Theoretically, they could, like, I don't know, Expressive Iteration into Bolt Breach. So, Iteration, Bolt, Breach. They still wouldn't have enough. But maybe something happens that they're able to kill me from there. Sprite Dragon into Preordain into maybe something like that would work, like Sprite Dragon into Preordain into Underworld Breach with Mutagenic Growth. That could probably kill me. So the important thing is there is something my opponent can do to kill me. So I want to take the opportunity to try to win the game this turn as best I can. I cannot win the game if they have something non-land to discard to Kroxa and my attack isn't lethal because I bolt the Swift Spear and they just like block the Shadow with Gigantha. But if I escape the Kroxa first and see what they discard, in this case a land, putting them down to 5, now I have free reign to bolt the Swift Spear and attack in for lethal, and there's nothing they can do about it. They've only got 1 card, so they can't force a negation. But it's just a sequencing thing of like, hey, I can guarantee lethal if they do this thing, if they discard a land here. So I'm going to go for that first. 2-0, on to round 3. Steam Vents for Ragavan. Looks like another mURktide opponent. A blue fetch land into a Steam Vents for the Ragavan. Kind of gives it away. Second Ragavan, still only 1 land. Really good for us. We get that Bowmasters off the top, so we'll take that opportunity to knock the rag down a peg. Unless they have Subtlety. I don't know who's playing Subtlety or who's playing around Subtlety main deck, but it's not me. They do. I did put our Bowmaster on top. They got to hit into it. I was kind of like, oh, I don't really care if they play the Bowmaster, if they spend all their mana doing that. It was a little unfortunate that they hit a second land right there. But at the end of the day, I'm still not very upset about it because they don't have a good attacks in with the Ragavan. I've got the Shadow. I've got the Terminate. Their last card's a counter spell, so they can't kill my Shadow. They've got a counter spell. If I find something relevant, I can counter or I can Thoughtseize to clear the way just like that. And then here, putting myself dead to a lightning bolt exactly, but everything else I don't really care about. I could Unholy Heat the token, but they've got the Force Negation that I know about, so I might as well just wait for the next thing and Unholy Heat it while they can't force. Because if they don't find a threat, then I just attack in with the Lethal Shadow. If they do find a threat, I Unholy Heat it. So, seems like a good trade-off to me. We've already talked about sideboarding against mURktide, so I'm not going to talk about it too much this time. I think the only change I made for this game was I boarded out one more Rag and one more Thoughtseize, and I think I might have boarded in the 2 EEs. A lot of times I'll do like a sideboarding based off feel kind of thing and just like, oh, I didn't like the way this felt the first game, so I'm going to, or the first round against this deck, so I'm going to change it up a little bit the second time. Like, I felt like I was wasting all of my Terminates the first time on Channelers and Ledger Shredders, and I don't want to be doing that. I want to save my Terminates for mURktide, so I figured bringing in the EEs would help me fight a little bit more over the cheap stuff with those, and then hold up the Terminates and stuff for the bigger threats later. And whole mess of Dragon's Rage Channelers, which is, it's okay for us. See if we can get the block and scare them with the Bowmaster. Really, I just wanted the mana, but there was the hope that maybe they would not block because they were afraid of Bowmaster. Since I just ditched one, there's a reasonable chance I got another one. But here, the downside of Dragon's Rage Channeler means they have to attack, which means I've just got a lethal attack back with Shadows and Shaman. So, yeah, take that, Dragon's Rage Channeler supporters, as we move on to 3-0. Yeah. 3-0, on to round number 4. We are on the draw. We don't have red mana, but I've got plenty of chances to find one. I still have a turn 2 Goyf up against Rhinos. So some might say this is a pretty awkward hand against Rhinos, and some might be right. A little bit better when your opponent misses their second land drop. And they can't dead and gone my Tarmogoyf here or fire and ice it. So I'm just hoping to get some pressure going before this this Crashing Football starts coming off suspend, which they do have 2 copies suspended right now. Fable will help smooth out our mana with the Shaman token. Also, I'm just really hoping I can get to Kroxa like ASAP. Because if I get Kroxa down, then I can outgrow the Rhinos. I can swing into the Rhinos pretty well. We do have one set of Rhinos coming off suspend. Terminate while still on their upkeep in case they have something like Mystical Dispute. I don't want them to have a land and then counter it. No block. Again, Terminate on their upkeep, so they can't Force of Negation my Terminate, and they end up just scooping up there. Nice. Sideboarding against Rhinos. I got to remember that. I don't have to go over and click it. I can just like hit the space bar. Sideboarding against Rhinos. Orcish Bowmaster, horrible. Bring it out. Terrible, 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 terrible. Doesn't kill anything. Playing your 2 mana for 2/1/1 bodies looks a lot worse in the face of not only Fire and Ice, but Fury, and the fact that your opponent's playing 0 mana 2 4/4s. So, yeah, trade-off's not great. Ragavan, kind of the same reason, especially on the draw. Ragavan is horrible against Dead and Gone, Fire and Ice, Fury, not attacking through Rhinos themselves. So the first one might be okay if it's on turn 1, but if not, then you never want to see it. Sideboarding in the 3 copies of Chalice of the Void, 2 copies of Engineered Explosives, and the Terminate. So anything that can kill a Rhino is coming in, and the Chalices are the only way that we have to say no in this deck. So they're obviously coming in because, hey, I don't want my opponent to have multiple 4/4s on the battlefield. That doesn't sound fun. The first hand, we had the EE and the Shadow, but that was it. Like, I really have no intention of keeping a 5-lander against them. Yeah, just too much that goes wrong. If they counter the EE, we're in trouble. This hand, really, really good at stopping the Rhinos because I've got Thoughtseize to fight over, like, Force and Negation to make sure this Chalice resolves. Not so good at fighting. Well, it's okay at fighting over the fair stuff. We see they've got a mURktide and a Subtlety, but I do have a Terminate and an Unholy Heat. They've got 2 copies of Footfalls suspended. So as long as they don't find a way to answer my Chalice, then I've got those covered. I know that I have the Chalice when I cast that EE, but I need to get closer to Delirium so that hopefully I can just like Unholy Heat down the Subtlety. We're also running into the whole like not finding a second land thing, but one step at a time. So they've got a Subtlety. The first Footfalls is countered. And if you know anything about Magic the Gathering, which I'm sure you do if you're watching the channel, you know they top deck the Otawara between the 2 copies of Footfalls. So they're able to bounce the Chalice and immediately resolve that second Rhinos, which we are going to get that back down. We've got a kill spell for the Subtlety. They're going to try to take us down to 1 like the fiends that they are and play a mURktide. All right. The bluff attack of all bluff attacks. My opponent just saw Lightning Bolt taking down the Subtlety. So that hopefully is fresh in their mind. So as soon as I get to my turn, snap, go to attacks. Snap, go. Do not give them time to think. Go to attacks. Go. Opponent ends up fear blocking the Shadow. So I'm able to kill the Shadow or kill the mURktide and Unholy Heat the Rhino. Because they're afraid, if they hit me for 12 and then Lightning Bolt, I'm dead. So I need to stop that from happening. Let me block with a mURktide. And we end up like stealing a win there because we just went to attacks while they're thinking about Lightning Bolt. If I take too long, then they start wondering like, well, why is he taking so long? If he had a bolt, he just attacks and bolts me. So sometimes it pays to be hasty. In the blind, really good Shadow hand. Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf, so you know we Thoughtseize our opponent and see natural Tron, Expedition Map, O-Stone, Relic of Progenitus. Against our Thoughtseize Tarmogoyf hand. Huh. So, we call this a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. I can take the Relic of Progenitus to keep the Tarmogoyf a little bit bigger and then just have to deal with the O-Stone. He's going to pop O-Stone eventually. I could take the O-Stone and just let him have the Relic. He's going to shrink the Tarmogoyf eventually. I decide to take the O-Stone on the simple thought that I have a second threat past Tarmogoyf with the Bowmasters. Maybe I can find a Shadow, maybe Ragavan off the top or something. I don't know. Like I said, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Opponents kind of got our number with this one. But that's why we have sideboarding. Like I said, this is a horrendous matchup for us. So anything I do is bringing our percentages from, I don't know, 10% to 15%. But we do have a reasonable amount of pressure. Like, we've got double Goyf, got the Shaman, we got a Bowmaster in the back. We're actually looking at close to lethal. Never mind. The natural Ulamog draw. Kroxa mostly for giggles. Probably would have been better to Bowmaster and block with the token. But they would have been at 3 more life. Either way, they find a Worm Coil. Pretty game over at that point. Can't attack in. Can't deal with the Worm Coil. On to game 2. Sideboarding. Like I mentioned, I've got 47 cards on my sideboard for Tron right now, which is why you see this entire first row of stuff I've boarded out. The 4 Unholy Heats, a Lightning Bolt, Terminate. Bringing in the Collector Oofs, bringing in the Terra Sunder, the Blood Moons, 3, 4, 5. What was the last one? Terra Sunder, 2 Blood Moons, 2 Collector Oofs, and the Damping Spheres, the 2 Damping Spheres. And boarding out the 4 Unholy Heats, the 2 Terminates, and the Lightning Bolt. So, bunch of stuff in the deck for Tron post board. Really good hand. Turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 either Terra Sunder or Collector Oof, your turn 1 artifact. Turn 3 Fable, start trying to turn the corner a little bit. Exile the Dismember. So they had the Haywire Might, so that would have been pretty good against Damping Sphere or against Blood Moon. We'll play out their Relic just in case we want to draw something later. Okay, Natural Tron. Again. We don't have to worry about the ring. We can't attack in. Like, they still get the ETB trigger, but we don't have to worry about them drawing a metric boatload of cards. But now we can start attacking. Now the time is ours. I'm just going to hope they don't top deck anything relevant. Okay, pretty good. Except if they just get a bridge, we get to Terrace under that, untap, and present lethal, which is exactly what we're going to do. And on to game 3. That looked pretty good. I want to do that again, game 3. Triple Ragavan, double Bolt, Thoughtseize. This hand is horrendous. Triple Ragavan against a deck that's probably not answering the first one. And then Bolt and Thoughtseize doing little to nothing. So we're going to throw that back. Got Terra Sunder, but double Bolt, no threat. No pressure. Got to throw it back. Going to 5. Oh, we've got Ragavan and Shadow and Damping Sphere and no land. So we're going to 4. Okay. Reasonable 4. We've got Ragavan. We've got Blood Moon. We'll probably just throw back like Kroxa, Terra Sunder, and a fetch land and pray. Seems reasonable. So we've got turn 2 Blood Moon. If they don't have like a turn 1 Dismember for the Ragavan. That's it's about as good as you can ask for a mold of 4. All right, so they've got Tron available, turn 3, off a turn 2 Talisman of Resilience. Yeah, that's a magic card. We can get our second swamp, so we've got all of our black mana. Oh, Haywire Might. So there goes the Blood Moon plan. Unfortunately, we do not have a second Blood Moon or a Damping Sphere on our mold to 4. So probably not a great spot for us. Well, 1 Wormcoil Engine. That's okay. I think we can maybe play around 1 Wormcoil Engine. Second Wormcoil Engine. Little bit sketchier. Terra Sunder. Fantastic top deck. Deal with the Wormcoil. Attack him with the Ragavan. Maybe we can find something relevant to do. Well, we could dismember an Unholy Heat, but then we go down to 4 and we just make 2 3/3s, so that doesn't really accomplish a whole lot. So if they just stay at the Wormcoil, then we could like attack again, maybe play Gigantha, have a chump blocker. Oh, Urza Saga plus 3rd Wormcoil Engine. Okay. I think we can scoop this one up now. Move on with our day. And a ring in hand. Why not? Lovely. So, I mentioned Tron Amulet Titan as being like the worst matchups for us. That's why. A lot of times, whatever interaction you have just doesn't matter. That being said, Collector Oof looked 20 times better than Blood Moon against them. So, if I'm playing in another challenge and I'm expecting a lot of Tron, I'm probably going 2 or 3 Collector Oof. I know they stop the treasures on our side, but if they stop my opponent from just playing Magic, then I don't really care about the treasures. Now, it wouldn't have stopped Natural Tron Wormcoil Engine, but if your opponent just has the Tron and they have the payoff, not really a lot you can do about it. But Collector Roof at least lets us slow them down from having the payoff. This is round number 6. Up against Hardened Scales. 4 Scales into Automaton. Always fun. I believe I end up just like flashing in Bowmaster here. Yeah. Now, this, I elected to get offensive. I probably could have been better off just like bolting the Automaton. But I kind of figured that dealing with this one threat wasn't really solving anything for me. Like, I deal with it and they still get more threats. So, I don't know. It's a tricky one. Like, I would definitely be open to being wrong on that decision. But at the same time, I do have to understand that my opponent had like the curve out of Hardened Scales into Automaton, into Hanger back with a Saga, into second Automaton, Walking Ballista, or yeah, would have had second. I exiled the second Automaton. So, like at some point, you just have to accept I could have bolted the Automaton to slow things down. Would not have mattered. Sideboarding against Hardened Scales. Terra Sunder is your friend. Terra Sunder is your bae, your boo, your ride or die. It exiles Hangerback Walker. Stops the trigger off that. Hits Urza Saga, Hardened Scales, Ozolith, the new Ozolith. Ravager stops the Ravager modular triggers, stops the Boz modular triggers. Yeah, all that stuff. Fantastic card. So obviously that's coming in. The extra terminate's coming in. The engineered explosives are coming in. the collector oofs are coming in. It's like the 2 oofs, the 2 engineered explosives, the terminate, the other Terra Sunder, and I feel like I had something else. The Blood Moons. Blood Moons coming in because of Saga and Ink Moth Nexus and all that fun stuff. Boarding out the Ragavan because anything on the ground just eats up Ragavan, and it's so awful into cards like Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista. Bowmaster can be okay on the play if you get like a cheeky ping of a Zabaz or something on turn 1, or a 1/1 Hangerback on 2. Fable's kind of slow and clunky, so I trimmed on that. And then trimmed on the Questing Druid because I just wanted like bigger threats. Questing Druid can grow, but you really have to play it out and like build into it. So we've got a Blood Moon. We've got a turn 2 Goyf, which Goyf is an excellent, excellent threat in the matchup because it does grow very, very aggressively when you add artifact and creature, instant, enchantment to the yard. Opponent misses their 3rd land drop. I'm not going to play out the Blood Moon yet because it's just basic forest, and I don't want to show them the Blood Moon, especially when they miss the 2nd land drop. Now, if they went like Saga Patchwork Automaton, then I'm absolutely playing the Blood Moon. But now I get to go to game 3, having won that game, even off a stumble, by just not showing them Blood Moon. So we've got Blind Pithing Needle naming EE. Thoughtseize away a Hangerback, and they just got 3 lands. And this was another absolute punt out of me, just forgetting about Grove of the Burn Willows in hand. Just 100% forgot that card was in the hand between them like playing out or playing the Grove and playing the Hardened Scales. Or not the Hardened Scales, playing the 2nd Ink Moth and attack, and just forgot it was there. But we get a nice little follow-up here because I don't know if you noticed, but they have a bunch of lands that don't produce green and don't do anything. Got a Karn that goes and gets an Ensnaring Bridge, which I was not expecting at all. I did not know that this deck ran Karn. But that's kind of okay. We've got Terra Sunders we draw into. Collector Roof does stop our treasure and our bauble, but it does not stop our reflection. And then opponent passes here with two cards. And I kind of realize, like, oh, they don't have green mana. So things like Ancient Stirrings, more Hardened Scales, new Ozolith are all just getting stuck in hand because they can't cast any of them. We got a Walking Ballista on 5. That's pretty cool. I see your Walking Ballista on 5, and I raise you a Gigantha on 5. Mine costs 1 less mana. And as long as they have Ensnaring Bridge out on their side, the Ballista can't attack. But Gigantha can tap for mana to give us all sorts of color options through a Blood Moon. Let us attack in for a decent little chunk. Zabaz and die. Blood Moon. It's your friendly neighborhood Blood Moon endorsement. So this is on to round number 7, playing against Sven Feeder Sven, master of the Izzet archetype. So if you don't know, Sven, very well-known Izzet mage, played every sort of Izzet variant you can imagine. So I'm expecting some sort of like blue-red control. Not really expecting mURktide. Mutavault kind of gives away that they probably have Flame of Anor in their deck. So Flame of Anor, Mishra's Bauble, and Holy Heat. It's kind of got mURktide vibes, but Lose Focus, I don't think it's a mURktide card. I've also never seen that card before in my life. So it's 1 and a blue, counter unless they pay 2, and then it has Replicate for a blue. So you can pay 3, counter it unless they pay 4. It's kind of like a mana leak on crack. And then this card, Scalding Viper. Never seen this one either. It's got an adventure side that bounces a non-land permanent, and then the creature side is 1 in a red for a 2/1. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, it deals 1 damage to them. Pretty cool. As we've seen, our opponent does have the card Unholy Heat in their deck. So when I get ready to math this out, I start thinking about how do I want to sequence? Do I want to kill the Viper and then Thoughtseize? Do I want to Thoughtseize and then kill the Viper, then Shadow? Do I want to Thoughtseize, Shadow, then kill the Viper? And it ends up being Thoughtseize, Fetch and Shock, Unholy Heat, and then cast, or Fetch and Shock, Shadow, and then cast Unholy Heat. The reason being is I get to go down to 7 off of the Unholy, or off the Shadow, and then down to 6 off the Unholy Heat. Makes the Shadow a 7/7, so it's not dead to an Unholy Heat off of their top deck. So we end up having 2 threats down that don't die to Unholy Heat and get to attack through. Opponent could chump block for a turn there, but I'm assuming they just didn't have anything in their hand, and chump blocking was just like fighting uselessly. Sideboarding. Sideboarding, I really wasn't sure of because I saw Flame of Venor, I saw the Viper, but that could mean anything. Like, it could be wizards, but the Viper is not a wizard, so who knows. I decided to board out a Ragavan on the draw because they looked like they had a ton of 1 mana interaction for Ragavan. Boarded out... Was that my only board out? Yeah, I just boarded out Ragavan and boarded in Unlicensed Hearse. That was it. At least for this game. So it's the benefit of being up a game. You have a little more leniency to kind of figure out what's going on game 2. And then you can make some more adjustments going into the play game 3. Like, I saw counter spells, I saw removal spells, I saw the Viper, so some sort of control, tempo-y sort of deck stuff, things. You know. Flash in the Bowmasters here, really just trying to, like, eat into a counter spell so that Thoughtseize or Fable can resolve. But opponent does not take the bait. So I could go to jam a Fable here, but I think I'd rather just go for the Thoughtseize. Pass the turn back. Good old Dress Down. Okay. So Dress Down into Mutavault, Animated Self. This is something I really hate, is from a play design standpoint, is cards like Flame of Venor getting the added effect on cast. I hate things giving abilities on cast or creating triggers on cast. I feel like everything should be determined on resolution, but I understand that you have to choose 2 modes as you cast it, so you can't really have that on resolution with that variability of choosing targets. So I understand it. I don't like it, but not really a lot I can do about it. Not my call to make. Either way, opponent does just have 6 cards in hand. Would have loved to have gotten that second Fable down, so maybe I should have been less aggressive with the Ragavan into open mana. But I was kind of hoping that between the Ragavan attack and the Fable, the Shaman token attack, that I would be able to make an extra mana to get down the second Fable. I didn't expect them to have 2 1-mana answers. But either way, opponent is at 4 life. Kozilek's Return. Modern staple, patent pending, Kozilek's Return. So now I'm terrified that there's going to be some big Eldrazi that triggers the backside of Kozilek's return. Kroxa, probably one of the best draws I could have right there. Unfortunately, Kroxa gets ditched into another land, so... but we do get an escape Kroxa, and we have the ability to escape Kroxa again next turn, and probably the turn after that if they answer it again. Heat Le Kroxa. Okay. Flame of Anor to draw a couple cards. So, yes, I know I could be like fetching and shocking aggressively to try to set up Shadow. But I really don't like playing the deck that way, especially in these kind of matchups. Like we see Seal of Fire in their graveyard, Lightning Bolt, Scalding Tarn. And then I get punished heavily. Heavy punish for not playing my land out first. So I could have fetched in response to the subtlety, kept the Kroxa on top, terminated the subtlety, and had enough mana next turn to play the Kroxa and escape it. But instead, I didn't play out the land, so now I have to just play like the front half of Kroxa, decide if I want to terminate or escape the Kroxa. I'll talk about this line a little bit because I decided to just go for escaping the Kroxa, kind of thinking, oh, they have the answer this turn. They would have had it next turn, but if they don't have it, then I'm in a better shape. I think I could have waited. I think I could have just like added Giganta to my hand or held up Terminate and tried to see if they would counterspell the Terminate and then just have the Kroxa later. Because as soon as this Kroxa gets countered, like, my pressure is non-existent now. I've got no Giganta in hand. I've got no way of escaping Kroxa again. So, I feel like giving them the chance to terminate would have been better. And then I would have had this turn where I had Fable plus add Giganta. So, if they didn't fight over the Fable, then my situation gets a lot better. But instead I get Snap Flame of Anor. Yeah. Gross. I say gross because that's such a good value play. If you don't know, Snapcaster is in fact a wizard. Not to be confused with lizard. But pretty good wizard to trigger Flame of Anor off of. So we get to go into game 3. I didn't talk about sideboarding too much, but I did change things up a little bit. For example, I brought back in a couple of the spot removal spells and Blood Moon. It looked like with Steam Vents and Cascade Bluffs and some of the options like that they were a little bit weaker to Blood Moon if I had the opportunity to kind of set it up. So you'll see turns like this where I intentionally get a shock instead of a basic swamp because I don't want them picking up on Blood Moon. I don't want that to be anywhere on the radar. Double removal spell. Triple expressive iteration. Snapcaster, minor misstep. Oh boy. Oh boy. And speak of the devil, I was really hoping that they would not get a basic island here and they would just get like a Steam Vents, try to keep their mana available. So them having the basic island and then drawing into another one right off the bat was pretty rough. But with expressive iteration, it could really cut into their blue availability quickly. So you'll see me like firing off the beast side of Questing Druid just to try to eat into this blue mana some, because maybe if they counterspell this, I get a free escape on Kroxa. And ultimately, I do completely believe that if I can get Kroxa down and it survive for a turn, that's like enough to swing the game in my favor. Thought about escaping the Kroxa there, but I figured they wouldn't be casting a bunch of stuff if they didn't have an answer for it. And sure enough, they do have the Spell Snare and the Counter Spell. So we'll just keep putting some pressure on them. Keep like playing out these slightly more undeserving threats. Give them stuff to fight over. Eat the counter spells up. That way I can save Kroxa as like my grand finisher. Okay, that was 4th copy of Expressive Iteration, so all 4 of those are pretty good. Kill the Viper, get an attack in. Then I think this is just... Yeah, this is where I start going for the Escape Kroxa, because I know they have the Spell Snare, but they're down to a few more cards, and if I'm able to... Again, land the Kroxa, I'm in good shape. Unfortunately, as you could probably guess, there are quite a few counter spells in my opponent's deck. But we've got a Hearse. We've got a Bolt for the Viper. I've got a Bolt to help get cards back in my yard. I'm aggressively trading off this Bowmaster here, not only because it's losing the race, but because it's another card in the yard for Kroxa. Flame of Anor in response to the Ragavan. So we're still in the hope you don't draw a counterspell mindset. Play the Druid, try to give you something else to fight over. So the Druid plus Bolt is lethal. So I could just go for the end of turn Bolt here. I do not want to activate the Hearse, because if they have a Snapcaster and they respond to the Hearse activation with like Snap Flame or Snap Kill something, that's a really bad spot for me to be in. So I'm just going to keep casting whatever I can cast that just doesn't matter. But it ends up, they discard an Unholy Heat here, so down to 1 card. I'm going to go for the Upkeep Bolt. And their last card is another Unholy Heat, so we sneak away with the win. Still had Kroxa in the yard to escape. Still had Ragavan. Had the Hearse. So, yet again, I feel like this deck grinds extraordinarily well into the fair matchups and the control matchup, stuff like that. But we're on to round number 8, and we finally see Scam in round number 8. Again, what I think is another one of the reasons to play this deck. Opponent's got the turn 1 Grief. We're empty-handed, theoretically, except for the Bolt off the top. So you'll see me Bolt the Grief. If they have another Undying effect and the Grief comes in tapped, I get to get in with the Ragavan anyway. If they don't have another Undying effect like this, then I get in with the Ragavan. If they had a Bowmaster, they would have played it last turn, 100%. You don't want to risk that getting Thought Seized. So no Bowmaster, no Fable. Feeling like I can get another attack in. I meant to do a counter off screen so y'all can keep up with this. That's 2 Ragavan attacks and 2 lands I've exiled off the top of their library. That's 3 Ragavan attacks and 3 lands off the top of their library. So, Ragavan not being extraordinarily friendly to me at the moment. Kind of expecting a Fury, but they don't have one. We would have had Terra Sunder to kick to exile the Fury, so wasn't the scariest thing in the world. Sideboarding against the Scam deck. Ragavan's horrible coming out. between their Ragavans, Bowmasters, Terminate, Unholy Heat, Fury, Fable, Scammed Grief. So many ways to stand in front of it, so I just don't want that in the deck. Boarding in the Unlicensed Hearse, boarding in the extra Terra Sunder, the extra Terminate, and ended up boarding in one of the Engineered Explosives just as an additional way to kind of fight over some of the cheap things, the tokens off Fable, the Dolphy. Fetch before the Dolphy because I have Kroxa and I don't want all my stuff getting exiled. Now, I do 100% believe that Kroxa is the absolute mirror breaker in this matchup, and being able to Kroxa will like single-handedly win you a lot of games against them. So, Thoughtseize, we see EE and Alpine Moon. So Alpine Moon, I'm guessing they assume I'm Jund Saga and not Jund Shadow. So that's the only explanation I could come up with for Alpine Moon, which makes sense. But unfortunately, we are not Jund Saga, so Alpine Moon a little less interesting against us. I'm just going to play out the Goyf. I know they can EE away my Bowmaster and my Goyf, but then I just have Kroxa. And when my opponent decides to go for the Grief here into my removal spell, I feel like this is kind of game over moment. Like, they're going to have to spend some mana blowing up EE into Dolphy, sure. So now I get to ping, attack them down a little bit more, escape Kroxa. All right, so what was my thought here? I ended up going for Giganta instead of escaping Kroxa. I knew Bowmaster was coming off the top. I think it was just a mana efficiency thing. I really don't think there was that much of a thought into it, but I should have just escaped the Kroxa. Yeah, should have just escaped the Kroxa. But I think I was looking at, I've got 5 lands. I've got a Giganta. Let me just play out the Giganta. Realistically, I don't think it changes the clock, like, at all. Also very surprised that my opponent did not ping me with the Bowmaster and block, because that would leave me dead to Dolphy plus a top deck Bolt, but they could have just not been playing Bolt, and that would explain it a little bit more. So they end up Unholy Heating off the Dolphy to kill my Kroxa. I think that was the reason. I think I determined that they had to Unholy Heat to stay alive, and if they Unholy Heated my Giganta, then that was okay. If they Unholy Heated my Kroxa, then I didn't have enough to escape the Kroxa again. I'd have to spend more mana on Giganta the next turn. So I would just let them Unholy Heat the Giganta if they wanted to kill something, and then get to follow up with the Kroxa, because them discarding the Alpine Moon didn't matter. I knew they had something coming off the top that was going to block anyway. So, and then this is first round of top 8. So we made the cut as the 4th or 5th seed, something like that. And this is the first round of top 8. I have no idea what my opponent's on. Didn't play them in the Swiss at all. So we're just hoping to see something fair. Thoughtseize off a basic swamp makes me assume Scam, which is really, really good for me. Feel really, really confident if this is Scam. And then, of course, this is where Magic Online starts getting a little laggy. Like, We get to top 8, and it's like, we're going to be kind of slow on the replay. All right, can we, like, forward this along a little bit, maybe? I don't want to hit, like, skip ahead 30 seconds, because you're not going to get to see what happens. All right, so here's Goyf. Put it on taps. Cling to Dust. So now I'm not thinking it's scam anymore, because I don't think I've ever seen a scam list playing Cling to Dust. Especially instead of like a Dolphy or a Bowmaster or something on turn 2. Second copy of Cling to Dust. Now, I could have flashed in Bowmaster and gotten like a ping off the Bowmaster and a ping off the draw for Cling. But I really just wanted to like push the board out there. And then Demolition Field means this is in fact not scam. It's some sort of mono black list. Probably mono black coffers. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, the 3, in my opinion, worst matchups for the deck are Tron, Amulet Titan, and Mono Black Coffers. Because they are very, very difficult to interact with. They fight us on an axis that we're not very used to fighting on, the mana. They've got a lot of removal spells. We do not have the ability to say no to anything. And to make matters worse, not only do they have Damnation, which is horrible for us, I did not bring Veil of Summers to this event. Because, again, I feel like the Scam matchup and the mURktide matchup are pretty good. That I don't think I need Veil of Summers. Obviously, that decision didn't pan out too well. I also completely forgot how Orcish Bowmaster worked for a second. I could have killed it and attacked in, but instead I drew my cards first instead of just like flashing in my Bowmaster and killing their Bowmaster. And yeah, we're just not going to talk about it. So we're going to get Demolition fielded to Oblivion and tear asunder, but we are empty board. We've got the bigger threat at the moment. They do have Cling to Dust here, or just another Damnation off the top. Got it. So for a half a second there, we were in a really good spot. If they hadn't ripped the Damnation and they just clinged, then we had a good chance of like stealing something. Or, yeah, Ragavan stealing something on the next attack. Because they would have had to have blocked the Shadow or they were dead. So get a Goyf down. Again, we've got a potential lethal, except for a Shieldred. We're going to block Ragavan, stop me from getting access to any red mana. Then the One Ring off the top. And that's magic for you. Woo. I don't have anything I can top deck to get through a lethal attack. Alright, I think this was, yeah. I ended up attacking in. They were able to trade off with the Shadow. And, yeah, went downhill from there. Cling to Dust. Ring. No bueno. But Magic Online decided to be a little wonky and slow in top 8. We're on to game 2. Sideboarding. Let's pause it again. Sideboarding against Mono Black. Took out all the Unholy Heats because they got like Cling to Dust as Grave Hate in the main deck. So I'm probably not going to get to Unholy Heat a Shieldred. I could have brought in the Collector Oofs, but I was like, oh, they only hit the One Ring. Nothing else. So decided to leave those on the sideline. Boarded out a Ragavan. Brought in the Blood Moons. Brought in Tear Asunder. Damping Sphere because of Cabal Coffers. Something else. Either way, you get the idea. Bad matchup. Let's keep going through it. So, turn 1 Thoughtseize our first Goyf. We get a Goyf down. The best chance we have of winning the matchup is just like pressure, hope they stumble on finding a payoff, or we can answer their first payoff. Like if they get a ring, we can exile the first ring, or if they get a Shieldred, we can kill it right away. So you have to keep a hand that's got some good pressure. They've got Bowmaster. If there's anything we've learned about Modern recently, it's that Bowmaster is best used to Bowmaster other Bowmasters, but that means your Bowmaster's open to getting Bowmastered, and their Bowmaster is going to ping down your Bowmaster plus the token. We do find a 3rd land for Blood Moon, and at the moment our opponent cannot make any mana other than red. So fingers crossed they don't have a ring right away. Now, Blast Zone. That's a huge tip-off. Takenuma probably should be too, but Blast Zone's the big one. That I do not believe this is mono black coffers. I think this is just mono black mid-range. Bowmasters might be a tip-off, but I really don't play against this deck enough to be able to identify all of the tips. The things that should make me think, oh, this is coffers. This isn't something else. So I end up ditching the Damping Sphere here because I'm like, all right, I don't care about coffers while I have the Blood Moon out. I can't do anything to stop the ring. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have the Damping Sphere. And I think I ditched the Shadow too because I can't currently cast, or I can cast it, but it's going to die immediately. So that doesn't sound like a very good life for a Shadow. We do find a Kroxa, which we're able to get the 2nd black source off of this treasure token. Get down our Fabled, get some more pressure. And there's a big sequencing mistake that I make right here. So I'm going to have 2 Fable triggers. One to flip the first Fable into a 2/2, and one to discard and draw off the 2nd Fable. I've got Kroxa. I've got the mana available to cast the Kroxa. I should be resolving the flip one first. The reason being is when the discard one occurs, I do not want my opponent to get a priority opportunity between me discarding Kroxa and escaping it back. So if I discard the Kroxa first and then trigger the 2nd one to flip, then my opponent has an opportunity to respond with Cling to Dust, which I know is in their deck already. And I end up stacking my triggers incorrectly. And discarding first and then giving a flip opportunity. Thankfully, my opponent does not have a Cling, so I do get to escape the Kroxa. But I think it's important to point out that that was a mistake in sequencing. So we get to attack them down to 4, exile the ring, hope they don't have another one. Want to make sure I exile that ring before they get a chance to untap. Got a March of Wretched Sorrows. Like, I'm going back and forth on whether I think this is Cabal Coffers or not, because I thought March of Wretched Sorrow would be like a Cabal Coffers giveaway. But Blast Zone, I'm pretty sure, is not. Everything else could go either way. And then this turn, I could have copied the token, attacked with both of the tokens, and had enough black mana to Thoughtseize plus escape Kroxa, probably would have been the better play. But I kind of wanted another Fable down. Because if I had known that their hand was Terrace under 2 lands, then I could have Thoughtseized away the Terrace under, escape Kroxa, they ditch a land, go down to 3, and then even if they top deck the ring, they have to ditch whatever they draw into if it's non-land, or they die to just Kroxa attacking. So, we're attacking to make the treasure tokens, escaping Kroxa because Kroxa, and just hoping that our opponent whiffs on the ring here, because that's about all we can hope for. And they do. So we're on to game 3. Don't think there were any major sideboarding changes between games 2 and 3. I could have brought out the Damping Sphere, because again, I don't think they're on Cabal Coffers. I don't think so now. At the time, I was hesitant either way. So I ended up leaving them in there. But watching it back and then thinking about the match afterwards, I don't think they were on Coffers. So the Damping Sphere didn't do anything. Collector Oof I brought in because I thought they were a little more dependent on the ring. And then I know when they Thoughtseize me and they take my Bowmaster over the Ragavan, I know without a shadow of a doubt that they have a Bowmaster. But I can't do anything else. So there's no reason in not playing out the Ragavan. It's like if they have the Bowmaster, they're going to stop the Ragavan. Period. I have no other turn 1 play. I might as well throw it out there. And then here, yeah, like spot removal out the wazoo. Can't really do anything else other than just play out our threats and hope. They have the Blast Zone. They've got double Bloodsheath's Thirst, Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, Bowmaster for our Ragavan. They still got 3 cards in hand. I am well aware that we are looking plenty dead. Field of Ruin to start knocking away our land. So we did see Field of Ruin and Demolition Field. So at least like 5, 6 land destruction spells. Hopefully we get to the point in this game where we get to also see... Yeah, they play like the 1 basic forest so they can tear us under, stuff like that. We are effectively strip mined out of the game. They've got another demolition field, so as soon as we crack this catacombs, they'll have a target for that. I could fetch shock demolition or fetch shock dash Ragavan, but I know they have a Terra Sunder in hand, so they would be able to kick it, exile the Ragavan, and then I just die to the Bowmaster. So my only real out, I believe, is another copy of Bowmaster. So I can Bowmaster their Bowmaster and, you know. But unfortunately, we do not find a Bowmaster. I don't know if it was this game or the last game, but we did end up seeing Ghost Quarter as well. And I assume you don't run Ghost Quarter until you've maxed out on Field of Ruins and Demolition Fields. So that means like 8 copies of Field of Ruin and then some number of Ghost Quarter on top of that, which is absolutely insane to think about. And then another Bowmaster. So end up dying to Bowmaster. Fitting end. That's the challenge. That's all 8 rounds of the Swiss and the top 8. Really, really fun event. again, I do think that this deck has a lot of good matchups into the current meta. But if your losses, like we saw our 2 losses there, were Tron, Mono Black. Both horrible, horrible matchups. So I'm glad that we were able to beat the matchups that I thought were going to be okay, even if we lost to the horrible ones. I do really think that the horrible ones are so bad that there is not an effective way to sideboard against them. So if you don't want to run Blood Moon, if you want to run like Alpine Moon for the value hate piece or something like that, like if I was going into leagues right now, I'd probably keep the Blood Moon because I think it's really good for not only the cheese factor, but being able to slow people down, which is what you need a lot of times in the deck. But I probably wouldn't run Damping Sphere. I've liked the Collector Oofs, and I like the Terra Sunders, so I'd probably keep all those, but just like cut the Damping Spheres, maybe cut the 3rd Chalice, but depends on how afraid you are of Rhinos and Living End. If you're expecting a lot of Living End, I would keep the 3rd Chalice, but if you're not expecting it, I think you can beat Rhinos without it. I don't think you can reliably beat Living End without it. The Damping Spheres would probably become... I don't even know. There's not really anything that like swings big mana that much for us. So maybe something else against 4 color, like going back to a couple Turoks or something. In the main, Questing Druid was solid. Again, just like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't know if it's going to be a mainstay for me, but I've enjoyed trying it out. All the other cards, like there's so many 4-ofs in this deck that it's really, really consistent, really reliable. Like the 4 Shadow, 4 Goy, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Bobble, 4 Bolt, 4 Ragavan, 4 Unholy Heat, 4 Goy, 4 Bowmaster. Really, really nice to see those. You could always just swap out the Questing Druid for like a 4th Fable if you wanted that. Maybe the 20th land, but I don't feel like I had mana issues outside of the one game against Rhinos, but I had Chalice. So take it as you want. Other than that, I hope that this video helped you learn a little something about Jund Shadow and why I've been really enjoying it. Maybe it makes you try it out at your next event. Again, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave something in the description down below or leave something in the comments down below. I'll have a link to the deck list as well as a link to the Control Freak Discord if you want to come hang out, ask questions, and then a link to the Twitter and the Twitch. So if you ever want to know when we're doing a live stream, whenever one of these challenges is going live, if we decide to stream it or just leagues testing out the deck, seeing what works. I'm going to have a lot of streams of Jund Shadow coming up in the near future because I've got another big RCQ coming up and want to prepare for that. So hopefully you're as excited as I am for more Jund Shadow content. Other than that, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. I will catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.